All right. So recently, Scott Bessent, he is President-elect Donald Trump's announced. He is the Secretary of the Treasury for Trump's second administration. He recently testified before Congress, and in that testimony, he stated that the U.S. economy growth was about 4.1% over the past 3 quarters. This growth is significantly higher than Europe's reported 0.3% growth. Bessett attributed this acceleration to current economic policies and the administration's effort to reverse years of high inflation that has affected working families. The U.S. economy's performance has been a topic of discussion, especially in light of the longest government shutdown in history. Yada yada yada. So I was reading that the 4.1% growth, but I remember seeing something about unemployment still going up. And when I went to check BSL.gov, looking for unemployment, and we are still on an upward trajectory for unemployment, which is, well, right now it's at 4.4 or 4.5. And so basically, the economy is going up, and so is unemployment going up. I remember reading that that's referred to as a jobless recovery. And a jobless recovery is an economic situation where the economy begins to improve after a recession, but employment levels do not increase or may even decline. Granted, I don't know if we went through a recession in the past couple quarters, but so, uh, jobless recovery. It is what it is for now. Um, at least for me, there's a couple things that kind of like reason why we have growth, even though we have increased unemployment. Might one of them might have to do with the like we're like there's less reliance on government spending and more on the private sector, like with Trump removing a bunch of tax programs that you know uh, go to like museums or stuff like that. Money goes overseas. A lot of that's getting cut. U.S. AID, all that's getting cut, and it's now falling back onto the producers. That's one theory I have for the 4.1%. Another thing another thing, it kind of goes with the whole jobless recovery is the constant swinging of tariffs going back and forth. Tariffs, in my opinion, I don't entirely hate tariffs. Like, I don't think they're bad. If they were a bad thing, other countries would be using them against us. But my problem with tariffs is one, the extra tax goes on to the buyers because there's not competition here. Like when during the 90s and 2000s, when we kept sending our production companies our production like across the border, across the ocean, that means there's less people here getting jobs. And when we put in tariffs, because we've stopped producing a lot of stuff here, now there's no competition. So there's no incentive for the companies that are overseas to absorb those tariffs and put on themselves to compete with American companies. There's no company there are American companies to compete with. Well, there is, but on a lesser scale. So it's there's no incentive. So it just pushes their tariffs back onto us. Um, Another thing that I was looking up that might explain the 4.1% growth, but still increase in the unemployment is the excessive use of AI. There's a lot of no doubt there's a lot of AI being used recently, especially in the past. I would say here 3 months to a year. And the thing about AI and machines and computers in general is that they can increase productivity while decreasing the amount of labor needed. So those are just a couple things that could explain the growth. And for me, I was really looking at the unemployment as well. That's what got me thinking about it in in this way. Thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting position. I think like I don't know, some of the job stuff, the jobs report delayed again, which is obviously kind of concerning. But with the 4.1% growth, I thought I could be wrong. I'm looking around for it right now, but I thought I read somewhere that a lot of so GDP, I think by corporate valuations. So like if NVIDIA, because of the boom of the usage of GPUs to run LLMs, goes from a company that's worth, say, $1 billion to companies. Like that valuation is added to I think that's added to the US GDP. Um, so like if let's say, the total GDP is like dollars or yeah, let's say it's $1 trillion is the US's total GDP. It's way higher than that, but let's just assume it's like 4 trillion or 1 trillion. And the AI market, due to recent advancements, the valuation of some of the largest players go from a total of, you know, 1 billion to 4 billion, right? Or 100 billion to 400 billion. Then all of a sudden, like the market has grown, but it's really because it's like a big perspective market. Um, we're analyzing data or value that hasn't been realized as of yet. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely good that the market is still growing. People are still spending relatively healthily. Um, like everything afloat. If people are spending money, you want money moving through the system.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as people start to like pull money out of the system, things start to. But a lot of this can probably. To me, the most compelling argument here is that a lot of it is down to the AI market, sort of like just getting bigger as a portion of the overall economy, where previously companies like Anthropic or um, OpenAI just weren't that big of players. If they're suddenly becoming like bigger and bigger and bigger players, I wouldn't be surprised if like the US's total GDP wasn't affected by that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think I've been trying to look it up. I can't see it. I remember Trump saying that he was either like cutting taxes when it comes to companies that are focused on AI, or he's going to give funding to companies that are like focused on AI. I believe I'm trying to
Yeah,
find it, but I can't find it here. And
I think I remember something on that as well.
yeah, that probably contributes to the whole like Nvidia and other chip making companies that are like, we're gonna stop producing RAM and chips for like gamers, and we're gonna be focusing all of the stuff onto AI.
Hmm.
So that's probably again another example. Again, it's
Hmm.
the whole AI increases productivity while decreasing labor. Well, labor needed for a similar output.
Hmm.
And let's see. I'm sorry. I'm trying to look for it. I thought they said AI funding. Yeah. This is just AP News. President Trump on Tuesday. I'm not even sure if it was Tuesday. Talked up a joint venture investing up to $500 billion for infrastructure tied to artificial intelligence. So, and that's another thing. Like, I keep seeing these things like AIs might be taking our jobs, kind of stuff. Blah blah blah. And I'm wishy washy on it. I really am, because I remember reading somewhere in like the early like 1900s, the people, specifically Spain, I think it was in Spain, that they were having a similar like idea, but it was with the invention of the sewing machine, like an automated sewing machine, and people were like they would destroy like sewing machine factories because they thought they would be taking our jobs.
Hmm.
And I feel like we might be. I think we're having an AI bubble for sure. We can get back to that in a bit. But another thing, like, it's easy to think that AI is going to take people's jobs, and it probably will. But I think with a similar situation with like again, I can only think of the sewing machines. Is that like there are now more shirts and clothing being made now than there were 100 years ago. So I think with the
Mm-hmm.
whole like AI taking our jobs, I think that's like a like yes, it's scary now, but it's also one of those like, well, what can it create to help people get jobs? You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
again, I think we're in an AI bubble because I'm seeing this like when I look at the history of like stocks and bullshit like that. I say bullshit, but like with the dot com bubble.
I know what you mean.
So when it came to like the dot com bubble, what happened was, and this is according to a Yale professor, was people would because companies that had websites, their stocks would do well. So when people started making businesses, a lot of them were just like, let's just make our business a website, not like an actual business that has a website, but our business is the website. And then a bunch of
Yep.
investors would start investing into the website, and stock would go up, and so on and so forth, until eventually people realized that, well, these websites are just websites. And then boom, we had the
Yeah.
2001 .com bubble, and I think we're starting to see the same thing here with with AI. Like again, Trump just said that he's talking up people or whatever. $500 billion in investing into companies that do AI, and it's like, okay, AI with what? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do with AI. Tim
Yep.
Pool just showed a video today about he made a video game out for with Google's AI or Gemini or something. Like, now granted, it's
Mm-hmm.
like it ran like 20 frames a second, and he was the only character, but it made a video game in a relatively short amount of time. But there's that, and then something about Nvidia talking to Anna's library. You know what Anna's library is?
Uh, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the illegal like archive. But Nvidia was talking to
Mm-hmm.
them. They're like, yeah, we know we're gonna break the law, but we're gonna see how far we can get with it. Please feed us that information. You know. So
Mm-hmm.
where's that money going? Does that make sense? It just seems like we're just throwing
Yeah.
money at AI and kind of hoping for the best. And while it's cool that Gemini or whatever it was can make a video game, I'm still seeing AI with people with six fingers.
Yeah.
It's been like 2 years. But so now granted I do think AI is going to significantly improve, but I think what's going to happen is kind of like the dot com bubble, and I've been talking, you know me, I've been talking about this for years. Like we're going to hit a point where people realize that AI probably isn't doing as much as we think it is. Now granted, I don't know what my company does with AI, if they even use AI, but when I use AI, it's just asking questions that I probably could look at on Google. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I'm sure because of like Nvidia's got like they got AI programs for upscaling and frame insertion. But if we're throwing $500 billion, and that's just one little thing, one little talk, $500 billion into just AI, it
Right.
it's like
Like if I'm making like a program that's just like a ChatGPT plugin, right? Where I'm like, all right, my whole business model is I use a ChatGPT clone to better conduct B2B SAS negotiations. Like, do I count as an AI company? Do I get a piece of that pie? Because I managed to make something that is technically AI, right? I'm using a ChatGPT clone to conduct blah 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 blah. It's like, well, hold on, is this helping anything? Is this like, are we getting meaningfully better, or like, I wonder if we're gonna see some companies pop up that are AI in really big air quotes, but not AI from the perspective of developing new language models or new like computational things, but rather like tiny like small startups whose whole goal is to sort of bite off a piece of that pie by saying, well, we're an AI startup and we like to focus on um, chatbot assistance acquisition for delivery and customer face for delivery and other customer facing apps. It's like, wait, so your chatbot helps them decide what chatbot to get? Like, what? Did you make this chatbot? Well, yeah. Okay, show me your process. So we took this ChatGPT 4.0 clone and whoa. Huh? Well, yeah, but then we fed it this small local corpus of data and it and did a lot of prompt engineering and it runs on that. It's like, okay, so you're not really an AI company. You're you're basically a fraud. Like you're not actually developing any new technology. You're just taking something that like most people could theoretically do. Like your value add here is effectively non-existent. You're sort of you're building a middleman to do your middlemaning and then getting paid for it.
Yeah, and getting funding because you have a middleman.
Yeah, right. And then you're taking a bite of like a really of a pie that was theoretically sort of intended to be for like, hey, this is for the development of, programs that can help better detect like different forms of breast cancer or, programs that can better detect um or programs that can be used to like more effectively and efficiently write computer code or programs that can be used to uh do insert thing that is more useful than B2B, SAS, chatbot, decision protocol, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I get that, and my thing is like, so like AI isn't like it's been around for a while, obviously. And another thing that this kind of brings up because I was watching a video on I think it was Ordinary Gamers today about like how like artificial intelligence works, at least in the way we see it, is that it's not like really finding you an answer. It's just finding you what is like it starts making a sentence for your answer, and whatever is most likely to appear next is what it's going to
Hmm.
draw upon, something like that. So it's not like it's not it doesn't really seem like it's thinking for itself. Like it's AI. It only outputs what you input it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
It's
this
yeah.
and this caused and like now granted it was a short crash, but there was a stock market crash because of an AI system that did something similar. So everyone has stock and then they had an AI assistant. Now, when a stock goes down and it looks like it's projected to go down, most people would be like, "Okay, I'll sell." Some people would be like, "I'll hold." Well, this whole there's a like a bunch of people in their portfolios. It was run by AI, and once they saw like a stock go down, it was like, okay, well, it's time to sell. Well, it wasn't just one guy. It was an
It was
entire,
everyone.
yeah, it was everyone. So then everyone sold, and it dropped the price of the stock by like 95%, when in actuality, it probably would have dropped like maybe one or two.
Yeah.
So it went down, and then because it's down, it went back up again because the AI is like, oh, well, penny stock,
Right.
it might go
Right.
up.
Easy volatility to get into here.
Yeah, and so
Oh,
when
the
I
stock is rising. It'll probably continue to rise. Let me buy
yeah,
in.
let's buy more. And it's so when granted I use AI to ask questions or stuff, but it has a tendency to give me some wrong answers.
Mm.
Like I remember this was like a week after the first Trump assassination, like a year like 2 years ago. Wow, 2 years. And
Right.
it was like 2 weeks after, and you could ask any of the AI models, and they would tell you, no, he didn't get shot. He wasn't shot
Hmm.
at. There was no assassination attempt. And it's like, and then you yourself, me, you would have to feed it articles for it to be like, oh yeah, well I guess it did happen. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying we're not making significant advances in AI, but dumping $500 billion into it, into just AI instead of like more chips, companies that actually code AI. It seems like again, I think we're heading towards the an AI bubble.
Hmm.
And
No, I agree.
yeah, and so with the whole like, but back to the whole 4.1% uh like growth in the economy. Like one thing that this is going to be a little segue. Like 15 to 18% of GDP is construction, finance, and related services to housing. And that'll lead us straight into, according to the REA, the realestateagents.com. Wait, no, that's not it. We're going to scroll down a bit. Now, so when I was looking at this earlier, it said 70% of realtors didn't sell a single home last year. This statistic that 70% of realtors did not sell a single home in 2025 has been widely circulated online, but it's important to know that this figure does not originate from official National Association of Realtors data. Instead, it was made by a Redfin executive at an Inman Connection trade conference. The 70% figure includes every active license registered in multiple listing services, which encompasses part-time workers, blah blah. And when I saw the 70% of realtors, I was like, okay, that's kind of rough. I mean, again, I think the housing market's kind of, in my opinion, kind of skewed. Prices of housing's going up. But when I was looking up, 70% of realtors didn't sell a single home. I saw articles saying that from 2 years and 3 years ago that 70% of realtors, or at least around that number, didn't sell a single home in whatever year they're talking about. So I thought that was interesting. So I've come to a couple conclusions about that. Like as stated in Desert News or whatever. When it comes to like 30% of realtors, those might be like active realtors. I don't know
Yeah.
if a license has to be renewed for realtors or if you just kind of one and done kind of thing. But assuming that it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be renewed, those 30% might be people who are actually selling homes. And 70% of people are A, that's like a side thing they do, or B, they're out of the business but they still have a license. So I don't think that's a new thing for panic. And another thing, I don't know if companies like Zillow have to have the Zillow itself has to have a license.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure how all that works, but that might be another reason for it. People aren't going to realtor companies; they're going to places like Zillow and other apps like that. Very convenient, and then they'll find like a realtor there, so it kind of like forces people to go to one person instead of shopping around. Less
Hmm.
competition, housing prices go up, whatever. Let's see. Yeah, same number as last year. Oh, another thing that might be like the reason why 70% of realtors didn't sell a single home is that like prices are. I saw somewhere, uh, like market stagnation. Prices are getting so high that people are just like, I don't need a house. It's not worth the investment. Um, so people are like, I'd rather just spend my money doing something else, or finding like maybe more luxurious apartments. But with the whole like prices consistently going up, people don't want to buy houses. Like I remember reading somewhere that the average age of first time home buyers, like I know you don't like the word average, but like in the past couple of years, the average age is like 40 for first time home
Yeah.
buyers. So
Yeah.
now,
What's the statistic? The average age for a home buyer in 2005 was 39. The average age for a home buyer in 2025 was 59. Kind of sounds like they grew 20 years in 20 years.
yeah, it just seems like it's getting harder for people to buy homes. So people aren't even like thinking of buying homes. You know what I mean? Like I live in an apartment now, and I'm like, I don't even know if I can put the down payment down. Yes,
Hmm.
I know you don't need a down payment for a house, but I would much prefer if there's a down payment for a house. Uh, you know what I mean? Like because as prices go up, that down payment gets bigger and bigger, and it seems even farther off in the distance. I understand that. How to put this? Like for some, it's an investment. It's for your future, and like to an extent, I get that. But it's starting to get to a point where it's like it's kind of how do I put this? It's like joining a members only club. You got to pay the
Yeah.
expensive bill up front and then keep paying the membership fee just so you can have the cool leather jacket.
Yeah.
Uh, I have to have a good down payment, paying off my mortgage just so I can get yelled at by the homeowner association, you know, for having my garbage cans out in my
Yeah.
lawn. Whatever. So it's starting to get more, at least to me, Like the prospect of owning a home is getting further and further into the distance. Now I know
Hmm.
Trump and Kamala did mention this towards the end of her campaign about like maybe giving more funding to like construction companies or
You know,
finding more
the
ways like
and then
Section 8 housing.
the young family like housing credit and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, the young, yeah, I mean, giving credits to get the night, and that's a good incentive. But for me, I don't think that's going. At least unless they start, giving funds, loan, like, well, favorable loans to like construction companies. Like that's until that happens, creating more houses because it's supply and demand. There's a lot of demand, not a lot of supply of houses, so price is going to be high.
yeah,
So until the more supply of houses there is, it's just going to keep going up. So providing
yeah,
tax credits or tax relief, first time home buyer stuff, tax tax leeway, whatever. It's not increasing the amount of homes we have.
yeah.
So
Well, an interesting part of that when it comes to the discussion of housing is housing is like it's a national problem, but it's a local issue. So, for example, um, when Nebraska builds like 500,000 homes, that's not helpful. There's no economic opportunity in Nebraska. You're right. You might be able to get into a house for, let's say, 60 grand or like 100 grand, but the most you'll be able to make out there with that economic opportunity would be like your average income over there is, let's say, 50 grand. Okay, so it's around double your income. Whoop-de-doo. But if you compare that to somewhere like New York, okay, well, or like California, where it's like, all right, so housing here, there's less of it. They're not really building new homes. Let's say the average house there costs, you know, $500,000 or $200,000, like twice as much, right? But your average income is closer to that number. Like I don't think the average income in New York is like 100 grand. Um, but like if your like median worker is making like 80K and then the houses are like $200,000, you run into this weird issue where it's like, sure, you could live out in the middle of nowhere, but the heights you can reach are way lower, right? Your American dream is
hmm
kind of stifled, right? The
yeah,
most you can make out here is X amount. And if you want to make more, you got to go to these big places. And really, the issue with housing is not even necessarily like HOAs or any of these like homeowner groups like per se, but like there was this big movement decades and decades and decades ago about like getting into housing as an investment, right? You mentioned this a little bit. It's an investment in your future. Previous to, I think, before World War One, or I think no, I think previous or prior to, not previous to, prior to World War Two, housing was not seen by most people, unless you were ultra wealthy, as like an investment you intended to build equity in and then sell off when you get old. Um, and that's how it was marketed to a lot of people who are like sort of my grandparents' age, or my uncle's age, where it's like you buy this asset and it'll grow with you, and when you retire you can sell it off because it'll have accumulated value, and now you've got your nest egg, right? And the biggest asset in your nest egg is your house. It's like that's awesome. If like this is one of those plans where it's like it's a great plan if no one else is doing it, but
yeah,
it's horrible when everyone else does it. Where as soon as like that becomes the default position, right? So if you're in that position, right, you're someone who's been told that, all right, let's you can logically think through, you can make some very logical assumptions about that from that mentality that lead us to where we are now, right? So logical assumption number one, all right, we have to recognize housing is a resource. It follows supply and demand. I want the price of my thing to go up. I cannot generate more demand for my house magically out of nowhere, right? That requires more people to be born. I only have limited influence on that, right? I can only have so many kids. Um, but I also have the right to vote in local elections, which means I can affect housing policy. What houses can be built? What kind of houses can be built? How many houses can be built? Where they can be built? All of this stuff. And if I can do that, I can seriously affect the supply, right? So that's your next logical jump is, okay, well, I want to control the supply of these things to keep it low, right? So if the rate of growth of people is going to be, we're going to grow an additional 1% of people every year. But if we're also growing an additional 1% in the housing market every year, well, then the price of my house is just going to move with inflation, and I'm not actually going to make anything on the sale of this house. And I'm actually probably going to lose money because it's going to be an older house, so I'm going to have to like charge less, and it's going to have its own issues, and it's not going to have all the new safety features and all the new amenities that a new house might have, now competing in the market to sell it. So I'm just going to try to limit the growth of new housing from 1% to, 0.1%. I want it to be about 10% of what it currently is, or whatever smaller number than the current growth of population. So you do that. It's like, okay, well, that works for a while. You're now watching the price of your house go up, 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 and up, right? But then you get further down, and then you're like, okay, but I also need a way to but I can't do this on my own, right? So this is your logical assumption. You go, I need to control the price of housing, but I can't do it on my own. So this is where you get like HOAs, and this is where you get zoning laws, and this is where you get all this other stuff, right? This is where you get a city like Los Angeles. When my mom lived there, it was one of the fastest growing cities, or had just been one of the fastest growing cities in the entire United States for decades on end. By the time my mom left, it had downzoned and lost around 3 million housing units due
Wow.
to downzoning, right? So this is your next step up. So you go from, all right, I need to have less housing. How do I achieve this? Okay, I need to consolidate power. All right, so we'll do HOAs, we'll do, owners groups, we'll do like communities to try to keep this in check. I'll work with my neighbors who also own homes to keep this in check. And then your next step up is actually not only can we resist, now that we have a consolidated unit of power that has serious political influence, not only can we slow the building of new housing, we can actually destroy existing housing to bump our prices up, which is what happened in California. Specifically, LA is the city that has suffered from it most. But a ton of American cities have had downzoning where huge like apartment areas were basically paved out because the nearby neighborhoods that had more voting influence, because generally people who owned homes for a longer period of time tended to have their roots deeper in the ground. They also additionally tended to be older and thus more politically involved. This just seems to be the case in America, that the older you are, the more politically involved you are, because generally probably the more free time you have.
Fair.
So they started doing this. You got more involved, and if you can afford to own a home, unless it's like you're up against like Manhattan, and even if you're up against Manhattan, um, if your competition is Manhattan, you're probably well off enough that you can compete with Manhattan. So like we've got the suburbs of LA full of ultra wealthy people fighting the wealthy but less wealthy people in LA, and they just did it like tons and tons and tons of downzoning. Like it was like between 3 to 4 million like housing units were wiped out of LA. Like not just it could have grown this much but didn't. Like this is opportunity cost. It's literally destroyed and removed. Um, and so this is how we sort of arrive at where we are when everyone comes in with the notion of, I will cleverly beat the market and buy low, sell high with this house. Everyone does that. And then you're sort of where we are now, where it's like you look at the zoning laws where you can't do mixed use, right? You can't have the classic business on bottom, apartments on top. Um, uh, Housing can really only come in like three-ish forms. You get single family, ultra low density housing, which is like your suburbs and your exurbs. And then you get your ultra high density, like sort of like Section 8-esque, huge apartment complexes full of like single unit apartments. And then in some areas, you'll have like grandfathered in like housing that's like kind of medium, but medium high density, depending on the city. But like you really don't see this broad stretch from like single family homes to like ultra high density with like middle density and like light middle density and like heavy middle density, sort of like changing as the distance from like the city center grows or whatever like the demand in the area is, because well, that's bad for the people who own the homes, right? Because this is a
Hmm.
big difference between a renter and an owner. The renter doesn't have equity in this. They can theoretically up and move, right? And that's part of the appeal of renting. Is like you're not tied down. You don't have to. You're not sinking as much in um, with the big upfront cost, like you said. But if you're a homeowner, you absolutely are. If you're a homeowner, every new apartment in the area
Is a
takes a
threat.
dollar away from you, or at least it
Yeah.
feels like that, right? If your mentality is this is my nest egg, this is my investment, this is what I'm going to live off of when I retire, every new apartment takes a dollar out of your retirement. So they ended up fighting this tooth and nail. This was sort of mostly a boomer thing, although some Gen X and some silent generation were in on it, obviously. And they were just doing like what they'd been told to do, or what they thought they'd be in the market, or whatever. And so you end up where we are now with like, I think the estimate is like America needs probably about, I think it was some crazy number. It was like 100 million new housing units across the entire United States to resolve the housing issues. Not to mention all the stuff and this is partially why we had 2008 happen, because people couldn't get into houses. it's why the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac stuff, or part of why, excluding like hedge fund conspiracy theories, um,
Yeah.
that are at this point aren't really conspiracy theories, but like excluding some of that, the reason it was such a effective thing to do if you were a hedge fund looking to make money off of the crash of the American economy, then you need a market, and yeah, there's a huge market of desperate people who could not afford housing because there wasn't enough of it. And then 2008 happens, and now basically no housing gets built. There was some housing getting built before it, at a decent pace, but post 2008, no housing is getting built. Like you can look at all the graphs. It like tanks after 2008, 2012. Like it's just gone. There are no new housing units getting built. And the kind of new housing units that get built are single family homes, big houses in like small lots, trying to take up as much space as you possibly can, um, because that's where the market pressures are going, right? If you're a development company and you're going, okay, I can either fight tooth and nail against City Hall and all of these HOA groups to build an apartment complex that has 500 people in it for, X amount, or I can spend half of that to build three, or I can spend that money to build three houses that they won't fight. That's easier for me to do and sort of more aligns closely with where the market demands are. Because like if you're a new person, you're looking to get into housing, um, it's your best bang for your buck is building a house. But yeah, I'm not surprised that
Mm-hmm.
what was it, like 70% hadn't sold a new house. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if that was like totally 100% accurate, because right now it feels like, and I'm Gen Z is still on a decent path for home ownership. It's not like, everything is horrible all the
Yeah.
time and nothing's ever gonna go well again. Like Gen Z's on a pretty normal path. Millennials are on a pretty normal path, but it is definitely a more taxing path to remain on than it was for previous generations. Um, a home is a much more high commitment, high investment asset for younger generations than it was for older generations.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have as many options as older generations did when it comes to like, if you want to live in one of the big economic centers in the U.S. and you really want to like, make something of yourself, like sort of live that American dream. Um, Good luck, man. New York isn't cheap. LA isn't cheap. Miami isn't cheap. Dallas really well. And here's the kicker. I say Dallas, Houston, Texas, and Dallas, Texas are the like poster children for it. Literally is just market problems. They were having issues just like everyone else with really high prices of renting, high prices of home. You know what Texas did? Texas said, you know what? Build like crazy. We will just rubber stamp every building permit, and we will bulldoze any HOA that gets in your way. And you know what happened to rents? They stabilized and then they went down. It's cheaper now to live in Houston or Dallas than it was 3 years ago. That's seen nowhere else in the United States. It's literally a market issue. It's a solvable, resolvable issue. But the issue is, it you do have to sort of take this sort of like very we will bulldoze the old people who get in your way, who think that this is their retirement nest egg.
Yeah.
Um, and like that on some level that sucks, right? It sucks to be that like person who spent your entire life and then you watch your house value go from $40,000 when you bought it in 1980 at like a 13%, and then you refinance sort of at the um, height of the low rents that happened sometime in 2000, mid 2000s with like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where some of the interest rates were relatively low, not super low. So you got it like 40,000 at like 13%. You paid that, you paid that, and you paid that, and then you could refinance at a better percent. So then you paid that off, and then your house was probably paid off sometime around 2010. So you've owned your home for maybe 15 years now, and then you watch the price go from 40,000 to 80,000 to 150,000 to 200,000 to 500,000 to $1 million, right? Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or like even if it's just 600K, right? $40,000 to $600,000 because of market forces. You're looking at that going, "Man, if you're only retiring on like $1 million, that's 60% of your retirement." And then you watch them come in. You watch your local government come in and go, "Hey, I know you just spent the last 30 years building your entire, last 10 years of life around the sale of this economic asset, but we hate to break it to you. Uh, yeah, we're building like 6,000 new apartments, and you're gonna watch that 600K drop to like 100 in like a year and a half. Sorry, man. Good luck." It's like, well, fuck. I'm old. I'm starting to retire. I've got nothing else going on. Like, I didn't invest as much in stocks because I thought I had a much more reliable thing here in real estate. Like, I didn't realize it was going to vanish. And it's like, I do have a little bit of empathy for that. Obviously, the young
A
man in me
little
wants to
bit, yeah.
go fuck the old, yeah, fuck the old people. I want a future, and I don't care if it means taking away yours because you have 10 years ahead of you. I have 80. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this isn't even remotely comparable. Go die early for all I care. Um,
Yeah.
but like, and like as much as I want to say that, I recognize that there you do have to sort of like make some sort of appeal. And the real, the kicker of all of this is, and this is to me the kill shot question: who are you gonna sell it to? If kids can't live, right, young people, 20s, 30s, can't live in giant economic centers where they stand to make a ton of money, who are you selling to?
Yeah.
Because there's no one. There's no one, right? I can't afford that house because I can't get an apartment in a big city where I could get a job that could then me to afford that house in 20 years. Who are you going to sell it to? And the answer is probably the banks. You know what the banks were going to do? They were going to buy the houses in mass, and then they were going to sell the houses to like groups like BlackRock. And the issue is like this was, and even then, BlackRock's gonna. The real answer. Here's a very controversial opinion of mine. I actually don't care that much that giant corporations are building neighborhoods and owning like they own like 1% of the entire housing market. I couldn't care less. I want more houses to get built and I don't care who builds them. If BlackRock wants to build like 70,000 apartments in New York City or like Chicago or Miami or like I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah, as long as they're
There's a lot of
building.
people like, dude, yeah, I would lease a house from BlackRock. I don't care. Like you're right. I might not own the home de jure in writing, whatever. But
I got
I
a
have
home.
somewhere to work off of. I've got a home. I've got somewhere to work from. And it makes sense if you're an older person and you're watching these giant corporations come in and build large swaths of housing, and then they're looking to buy up all the old housing so they get like market dominance. Yeah, there is like a down the road concern here. But right now, 90% of all the homes in the United States are owned by single proprietors, which is like one person. Like one family homes are owned by the homeowner. Um, they're not owned by businesses. They're not owned by like small local like realtor groups. It is most homes are owned by mostly individual people or families. Um, I don't think big corporations are concerned right now. As a matter of fact, I think they're probably helping. I think this is a good market adjustment, and this is one of those things where it's like it was an unfortunate but really bad decision that they made, and like either it needs to be corrected or like there just isn't a stable future in housing. Like we either get too close to the event horizon of there's like a fine line of like how long you can keep new generations from getting housing at the rates that they probably should be achieving new housing, like independent housing so they can build their careers um, before you reach like a critical mass of like unemployable workers or workers that whom if they were employed probably wouldn't do as well as if they had some base of operations to work off of earlier. Um, I think you understand what I'm trying to say. Where it's like you hit this critical point, and if you go past that, no one will be able to afford housing because the worker won't be worth the money they would need to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. I get
Like
what
if
you're
I,
saying.
yeah,
And to
yeah,
kind of bring it
but
back to sorry.
no, you go. I was done.
Okay. Okay. So to bring it back to the original our first article. So you mentioned how like in LA, not only did they stop building homes, they started destroying them. Simple supply and demand create less supply that'll basically make artificial demand because there's less. And on top of that, Scott Bensett, when he uh, when he appeared before Congress talking about economy, blah blah blah, stuff like that, one of the things he brought up was how high housing prices are, and according to him, when he was I forgot who he was talking to, but he said when they brought an influx of about 10 million migrants to that area or to that state, that is now 10 million people. Not granted, probably not 10 million people because, one person, wife, and, a couple of kids.
Yeah,
So we'll just say 3 million people, just for rounding purposes.
yeah.
You now, same amount of, same amount of supply, but now we just increase demand by 3 million people. So, based on supply
Mm.
and demand, that means if we're going to put tinfoil hats on, uh, prices are going to go up. And that might be another reason how like we have a 4.1% growth. Well, we have a bunch of but prices of everything's going up and
Mm.
everyone's still buying this stuff. So yeah, of course it's going to grow 4.1% because everything's more expensive, but people are still buying it.
Yeah. I mean,
And
in a lot of cases, what choice do you have?
yeah,
And some part of me is like, I would kind of maybe believe that like immigrants have a hand to play, which I mean, I'm sure they do. If they weren't like, all construction workers, like, come on.
yeah. So that's that. And another segue, the whole like an increase the amount of people willing to buy a product will lead us straight into IPOs. So this comes from Business Insider. Let's see. It was written by William Edwards. Um, why Jeremy Grantham's GMO thinks the colossal tech IPOs expected this year could be bad for the stock market. Da, 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 da. Let's see. Investors are salivating at the chance to buy into private tech titans like OpenAI, Anthropic, and SpaceX when they potentially go public later this year, but the enormous influx of new shares in the market might not be a good thing. According to research from asset management firm GMO, let blah 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 whatever, the onslaught of mega IPOs set for 2026 could mean trouble for broader markets. Stocks are subject to the laws of supply and demand like any other asset, and when more supply comes onto the market without an increase in overall demand to meet it, prices could drop. As these companies won't be part of the S&P 500 when they list, their IPOs could trigger outflows of the benchmark index as investors scramble to buy in. Okay, so we just talked about increased people. So
Mhm.
mainly the article is talking about how it's going to hurt the stock market because, as Trump stated, he's putting $500 billion into AI companies, and with how popular AI is becoming, everybody wants a piece of the puzzle. It's the .com bubble all over again. We don't care what website it is, just throw money at it. We don't care what AI it is, we're going to throw money at it. Now, I'm going to quote The Wolf of Wall Street. An IPO is initial public offering. It's the first time a stock is offered for sale to the general population. And I'm going to stop there before I get sued. So, again, it's talking about how there's all of a sudden going to be these new shares. It's going to pull away from index funds. People when people don't entirely know how to invest, they'll throw things and they'll throw their money, which is fine, into the S&P 500, where it takes the money they brought in and just distributes it across the top 500 companies, and even then it's not evenly distributed. I think like 80 or 90% of the companies in the S&P 500, uh,
Mhm.
the top 20 or whatever, or get the biggest cut, and the rest get like a percentage of a percentage. So we can get into that later. So that's what they're worried about. People are going to take their money out of the S&P 500, VOO, stuff like that, and put it into AI companies, which yeah, it's bad for that particular stock market, and I'm sure it'd be bad for other stock markets that don't involve AI because everyone wants a piece of this pie. But because we have a bunch of people going into these AI stuff, it's kind of like, yeah, it's bad for them, but it's going to be good for the AI companies because again, supply and demand. When the IPOs come out, there's only a certain number of shares they're willing to share to the public, and we have a bunch of people, according to this article, that are willing to just jump on the bandwagon for now. And because they're going to jump on the bandwagon, that definitely means the price is going to skyrocket.
Mhm.
It's going to skyrocket. So it's one of those like down here, up here, and then once the companies start integrating to the S&P 500, it's going to kick other companies out. So the S&P 500 is going to go up because assuming the bubble doesn't pop. So this is not financial advice, but if I really had to guess, put some money if the drop happens according to this article, because people are taking their money out and putting it directly into Anthropic, OpenAI, SpaceX, whatever. Buy low, sell high. Not
Mhm.
financial advice. Do your own research, whatever. Buy the dip because eventually these, again, I do think we're heading towards a bubble. I do think AI isn't as further along generally than the public sees, but everybody wants a piece of that. So it's no doubt that these companies are gonna skyrocket, especially OpenAI and SpaceX, for sure. They're gonna go up. They're gonna go into the S&P 500 eventually, and because everybody wants a piece of that puzzle, the S&P 500 is gonna go up just later on. It's all about how long are you willing to wait.
Mhm.
So there's that. So I know the article is like, oh, it's gonna go down. Well, yeah, it goes down and it goes up somewhere else. It's not like we were expecting a crash. So there's that. Now again, I think this is like the start of the bubble. Again,
Yeah.
I'm just repeating myself now.
No,
Let's.
I'm with you. I got nothing to add. That was pretty good.
Yeah, sweet. All
I
right, so
agree.
we can wrap that section up.
No,
All right.
I agree. It's definitely one of those things where it's like have when you have more interesting stuff in the market, people are gonna all flock to that. If you watch like it's like you see this when um like you could you could equivocate this to like the history of like metals where like bronze used to be the super well valuable thing back in the Bronze Age, and then iron came along, and now that there's this cool new thing that's better, or that maybe serves a purpose of the old thing, or just takes up more space in the market. Well, you know, the bronze is just less valuable now. It used to be more valuable, now it's less valuable because other more competitive things that have entered the space, right? And if you're a company that is in the tech sphere and giant, companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, SpaceX come and go, oh, hey, by the way, we're releasing stock for everyone to buy. It's like, well, great. Now I have to compete with these guys. And actually, everything gets maybe not worse, but yeah.
Yeah, I got you. And not only that, like, I know we're possibly getting a new Fed chair. I don't know when he's being instated.
Yes.
I know we're getting that, but however, I do remember. I think Jerome Powell mentioned that they plan on cutting interest rates as the years go on, as this year goes on, and these AI companies are planning to. Now, granted, according to this article, are going to be, going public in 20, later this year. And something that should be noted, cutting or lowering interest rates is great for stock because now companies are willing to take out loans and throw their money into stock, get their money back, especially if the interest rates are low. That means there's less of a tax for them. They're willing to when interest rates are low, investment companies and banks are willing to be riskier with the money they invest. So we got interest rates being cut at towards the end, like getting cut towards the end of the year, assuming nothing happens, and we have these AI companies going public in 2026. If I was a banker, uh, and no one else was following my idea, I would take out maybe some big loans, throw it into the AI companies that are going public. So not only are individual stock traders going to buy up what they can of the what's it called of the stock of AI. Now you have these large investment firms and banks that are willing to be riskier with their money because they don't have to pay as much back with lower interest rates. So it's just again, it seems like we're getting closer and closer towards that bubble. Um, and I don't know, I'm trying to think of other times in history where something new appeared on the market and just tons of money be poured at it. But again, I can only think of the dot com bubble.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I don't know. I've got
Historically, each 1% increase in market cap through IPOs eventually leads to approximate 7.5% decrease in stock market price. Yeah, that's expected. It's going to hit the market. It's going to explode because everybody wants a piece of this puzzle. It's not like a company that's new where they hit IPO and the stock drops because people don't know about the company. And money loves
Mhm.
certainty. So if people don't know about the company that's uncertain, price drops. That's that. But everybody wants a piece of this puzzle, piece of this pie. So it's gonna go up for sure. And then people who are, active traders not looking for long-term investments, they're gonna be like, well, it probably can't get higher than this. They'll start selling, and we'll eventually hit that plateau. It's gonna drop, and then it's gonna rise again because flags. whatever. But yeah, it's a 1% increase, 7.5% decrease. That's standard, especially for standard for the companies that people are looking forward to. Anchor told Business Insider in December that the S&P 500 is due for negative returns in 2026, a call which is well outside the consensus of Wall Street. Uh, yeah, that's yeah, that sounds about right. All right then. Anything else to add?
Not off the top of my head.
All right, yeah. So, long story short, this is not financial advice. Do your own research, but buy low, sell high. All right,
Oh, so
sweet.
high.
Don't have an outro yet. Like and subscribe. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.